kids play pro-social games where you're actually helping people in the world, like Super Mario Sunshine, in which you help clean up a polluted island, super awesome game. Or what happens when we play co-op games. And you guys all have your super cool Plants vs. Zombies hats on. That's like really awesome. So yeah, turns out what happens is if we play these games for just half an hour, and this is true, they only tested this for kids aged 16 up through college age, but half an hour of gaming increases the amount of time we spend helping people in real life by a factor of 3. So 3 times as much time spent helping friends with a problem or helping someone in our family with a chore that we actually volunteer to help. It turns out that we kind of developed this cooperation radar. It's like looking for ways to be of help because it sets this cognitive framework in our mind. So this was a study conducted in Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, the United States, the Netherlands. They looked at thousands of gamers and their real life time spent helping people and the kinds of games that they were playing. And they could actually increase the amount of time people spent helping just by giving them half an hour of playing co-op. So, you know, for years we've been told that games bring out the worst in us. But is it possible that what's actually happening is that games are bringing out the best in us? If so, that would be a pretty cool side effect. Now this study was of 7,000 gamers playing music genre games like Guitar Hero and Rock Band, may they rest in peace. Oh, I know. So they were wondering if these games were a distraction. You know, people would get really good at playing virtual music and like never learn to play a real musical instrument. What they found out, on the contrary, was that 67% of these 7,000 gamers who were playing music genre games regularly, 67% said they had been inspired to pick up one of the instruments that they did not know how to play in real life and play it in real life after playing the game. 67%. And the more interesting stat was that among musicians who already owned a real-life guitar or real-life drums, 73% said they were spending more time playing a real instrument after they got the video game, and they were tracking how much time they spent. So, you know, is it possible that rather than distracting us from real-life goals, like learning how to play a musical instrument, that games can actually be a gateway, a kind of springboard to real-life goals? If so, that would be a pretty cool side effect. I love the research at Stanford University looking at how playing with cool avatars makes us feel and act differently in the real world. In case you're wondering, these were rated the 5 hottest avatars, male avatars, in Second Life last year. I don't know what you guys feel about that hotness quotient. But what this study found was that playing with an avatar that you think is hot, if you are feeling hot with your avatar, for just 90 seconds changes for 24 hours how confident you are in the real world. You're more confident in meetings, you're more confident taking tests, and the most dramatic impact was on flirting with members of the opposite sex, that you actually seek out more attractive people to flirt with after you've had an attractive avatar. You actually think you have a better chance with somebody who's really hot after All right, so, you know, is it possible that games are changing who we think we really are? And we go out in the real world and we actually feel better about ourselves and take more chances. If so, that would be a very good side effect. The most mind-blowing study I've seen in years was actually done by the U.S. Army's Mental Health Assessment Team. They were looking at coping mechanics, or coping mechanisms for soldiers stationed in Afghanistan. And they looked at everything from reading, to writing, to listening to music, connecting on Facebook, and of course, playing video games. What they found out was that soldiers who spent 3 to 4 hours a day playing games like Halo or Call of Duty actually had the lowest rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide attempts at home, depression, anxiety, domestic violence, that there was a direct connection. You can see in this chart over here, that bottom curve is for people playing 3 to 4 hours a day of video games. The further along the curve you go, the more time you're spending playing games. And the only thing that protected the soldiers better, so it gave them more mental resilience, was working out at the gym 5 to 6 hours a day. Now, I don't know about you guys. Between working out 5 to 6 hours a day and playing video games 3 to 4 hours a day, I think I know which one is more likely. And it actually has a very good effect. And so I've been working with the Army to kind of figure out what this means. But as we figure out the science of this, we can start to ask ourselves, are the games we play actually protecting us from real harm? That would be a good side effect. This last study is about all these scary games that we play, right? For a long time, people have thought that games that are really scary and just horrifying, disturbing, they probably give gamers nightmares, right? There's a woman, a researcher in Grant MacEwan University in Canada.
Yeah, Edmonton!
Yeah. She was studying nightmares, and she was studying general college-age population. And what she found were that gamers had fewer nightmares than anybody else. And more interestingly, they had the highest rates of lucid dreaming, which is when you realize that you're dreaming and then you take control of the dream to do whatever you want, like go flying. And it turns out, as she interviewed gamers more, she did more and more studies on gamers and dreaming. It turns out that gamers can actually control their dream selves the way they control an avatar in a game. So you guys may have had this experience yourselves. So that's pretty cool, like gamers are dream warriors. That's awesome. Okay, so is it possible that games can give us real-life superpowers? Like, that would be a good side effect. Okay, so that's actually what I write about in my book, Reality is Broken, looking at all of the science of how games make us better, and then what we can do with it in our real lives and in the real world. And I don't want to leave you guys in suspense if you haven't read the book, but the answer to all the questions is yes. Games do bring out the best in us. They are a gateway to real-life goals. They do change who we think we really are. They are protecting us from real harm, and they can give us actual superpowers. I wanted to figure out where all these superpowers are coming from. So let me just tell you a little bit more about the science of gaming and what it does to our minds and bodies. This is a quote that I found from a researcher who's been studying plays for decades, actually before video games were invented. And he had this great quote that really condensed all the science for me. He said that the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. This is really interesting. So if you look at the clinical definition for depression, it has two really essential qualities. The first is a pessimistic sense of our own capabilities, and the second is a lack of energy, a loss of appetite to get up and do things. If you were to reverse those two traits, you would get an optimistic sense of our own capabilities and a rush of invigorating activity. And this, I think, is a perfect description of what it feels like to play a game, right? When we sit down to play a game, we feel optimistic. We're sure that we can beat it. It doesn't matter how hard it is. And we're totally energized. We could be tired, we could be worn out, we could be frustrated, feeling terrible, and suddenly we're still staying up till 3 a.m. because we have all the energy in the world to play this game. Okay, so the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And it turns out that when we play games, we enter a very specific positive state of mind and body. Scientists call it eustress, which comes from the Greek word eu, or well-being, and stress. And this is really interesting because normally when we talk about stress, we mean the negative kind. We mean feeling totally pressured to do something that we don't want to do, or we're not sure we can do, we don't have enough time to do it. And when we get this external pressure, we experience stress as frustrating or anxiety-producing. And our body changes in response to negative stress. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing quickens, we have adrenaline going, we feel like we have to focus on this threat or this dangerous task that we're doing, and so we sharpen the attention centers of our brain. Now, what happens if we choose to tackle a challenge? What if we pick our own stress? It turns out we have exactly the same physiological changes. The heart rate up, the breathing up, the adrenaline up, the brain sharpening. But because we chose the challenge, instead of feeling it as kind of a fear or anxiety, we experience it as exhilaration, as drive, as motivation, as a desire to do something extraordinary. And it turns out that this is a very positive state of mind and body. In fact, it's an optimal state of human being. When we're in a state of eustress, we set more ambitious goals for ourselves. We have more motivation to really keep going to get the goals. We're more resilient in the face of failure. We're more likely to ask others for help. And they're more likely to help us because we actually become more likable when we're in a state of eustress. we're optimistic, we're energized, and so people like being around us. So being in a state of positive stress is an optimal state of human being. We achieve more, we build better social networks, and we just enjoy the feeling. It's a beautiful feeling to have. Now, I can talk about eustress a lot, but it's better just to see the faces of eustress. How many of you guys know this portrait series by Phil Toldano? This is an amazing portrait series. He took photos of gamers while they were playing games. So he set the camera up in front of the PC or the console. So let's, the faces of eustress, right? This is what we look like when we're playing a game. Positive stress, this is what it feels like. Now, I really like this picture because to ordinary people, this might look like negative stress. To people who don't play, a lot of games, they would see the dilated pupils and the nostrils flaring and the lips are pursed. I mean, this guy looks like he's pretty freaked out. But you guys are gamers, so you can probably recognize the signs of optimism here. I actually work with scientists at University of California, Berkeley, who specialize in reading micro-expressions in the faces, like the guy on Wyoming. And we can actually read two micro-expressions here. It turns out that the corners of his eyes are a little bit slanted up, and his lips as well. And those are signs of optimism. So yes, he is probably about to fail. This is right before a big epic fail moment. But he's optimistic, and if he keeps trying, he will probably get to this stage. Which is the epic waiting phase. He's like totally just shocked himself with what he's capable of. And this is what eustress does for us. It keeps us engaged in really tough challenges until we can get to this phase. And it doesn't matter how often we fail or how long it takes. Okay. This pretty much reminds me of the old saying by Noel Coward, great playwright. I'm a theater geek too, so I quote. He said that work is more fun than fun. And this is something that every gamer knows, because playing games is hard work. You think hard, you're acting hard, you're focused, you're overcoming obstacles. So work is more fun than fun. And gaming is the ultimate work. It's work that we choose for ourselves because it's work we want to do. It's work that motivates us. It's work that brings us together with our friends. Now, let's get to this contagious part, because it turns out that eustress and all these positive emotions we're getting from games really do mean something for our real lives, not just when we're playing games. There's been some great research into which emotions that games tap into, and these are the top 10 positive emotions that games produce. Everything from curiosity and excitement to contentment and creativity. Even love is number 8 on the list, which is maybe a little bit surprising, but it turns out that that's a very specific kind of love. It's the love we feel for somebody that we have taught or mentored when they succeed. So if you've ever taught a friend of yours, or maybe a kid or your sister about how to play a game, and then they got good at it, and you feel like this vicarious pride, like, oh, I love you. That's actually one of the top 10 emotions that games produce. Okay, so we know that games produce these positive emotions, but what you might not know is the effect that these emotions have on our real lives. So there have been decades of research into a phenomenon of how being happy makes us successful in real life and not the other way around. Now think about what we're taught, the old American dream. Work hard, be successful, and then you'll be happy. It turns out that the opposite is true. The most important ingredient to success is actually starting out happy, starting out with positive emotions. People who have more positive emotions before they succeed have better grades in school, they're more popular, higher achievements in real life, more raises and promotions at work, longer, more satisfying marriages. And it turns out that this happens for 2 reasons. And by the way, if you're interested in the science, there's what they call a meta-study, which is an analysis of hundreds of other studies that came out last year looking at this research. So just Google meta-study, happiness, success. And what you'll see is that being happy makes us more likely to set ambitious goals because we're optimistic and confident. So we actually start on the road to achieving something greater than people who aren't having positive emotions all the time. And also, we become more likable to others so that when they hear about our goals, they try to help us. They give us resources, they give us support. So that's why positive emotions make us more successful. And scientists now have been looking at just how many positive emotions you need to sort of tip the balance in the favor of more success. Because once you start going, then it escalates, sort of this virtuous cycle. And it turns out that that tipping point is 3 to 1. If you have 3 positive emotions, for every 1